My daughter used my own credit card to cancel my flight, told my doctor I needed supervision, and was already discussing selling my house with a realtor, and I found out about all three on the same Tuesday morning. I was 69 years old, 8 months into the worst grief of my life, and the people who called themselves my family had quietly decided I was no longer capable of running it. What made it worse? I had let it happen. Not because I was weak, because I was drowning after losing my husband of 43 years, and I mistook control for care. But the morning I found those bank documents, my daughter's name sitting on my accounts like she had already inherited me, something inside me that grief had buried came roaring back to the surface. I got dressed. I drove myself to the bank. Then I drove to an attorney's office. And by the end of that week, every single person who had quietly taken a piece of my life learned the same hard lesson, that my husband Richard had seen this coming long before I did, and he had already handled it. Drop a 1 in the comments if you've ever had someone confuse loving you with owning you. I read every single one.
My name is Evelyn Carter, and the morning everything changed, I was standing in my own kitchen holding a flight confirmation email on my phone, while my daughter Vanessa sat across from me finishing her coffee like she hadn't just dismantled my plans without asking. "Mom, I already called the airline. You've been struggling lately, and traveling alone right now just isn't a good idea." I stared at her for a long moment because I genuinely didn't recognize the version of my daughter sitting in front of me. 8 months earlier, my husband Richard had died after a 2-year battle with cancer, and yes, I was grieving. But grieving isn't the same as broken, and I needed someone in my life to understand the difference. Richard had understood it. Vanessa apparently did not. What hurt most in that moment wasn't the canceled trip. It was the casual confidence she had when she did it. No argument, no asking, just a decision made and delivered like I was a scheduling problem she had already solved. I set my phone down and asked her quietly when exactly she had put herself in charge of my life. She sighed the way exhausted parents do with unreasonable children and said, "Caleb and I just think you need more support right now." Caleb, her husband, a man I had known for 11 years who had moved into my home 6 months after Richard's funeral, along with Vanessa and their son Ethan, while they saved for a place near Asheville. I had welcomed them because silence after 43 years of marriage is its own kind of suffering. Every room felt like a reminder of someone missing. So I said yes to family, and I said yes to noise, and I said yes to feeling less alone. What I didn't realize was that I had also slowly said yes to disappearing. It started with small things: Vanessa opening my mail before I saw it, Caleb scheduling repair work without mentioning it to me first, cabinet reorganization because my system apparently no longer made sense. Then came the financial conversations, wrapped so carefully in concern I almost didn't notice them. "Mom, wouldn't it be easier if I helped manage the bills? Have you thought about simplifying your accounts? You really shouldn't have to worry about all this alone." Each sentence sounded like love. Together, they sounded like a plan. I just hadn't seen the full picture yet. You can tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, because I read every message. And if you've ever had someone slowly shrink your world while calling it help, type, "I see it now," so I know you're here. The next morning, I waited until Vanessa left for work and Caleb's car disappeared down the driveway before I did something I should have done months earlier. I got dressed in the navy blue blazer Richard always said made me look like I meant business, picked up my keys, and drove myself to First Carolina Bank. My hands were steady on the wheel, which surprised me because my heart was doing something uncomfortable the entire drive. part of me still wanted to find nothing, wanted to discover I had been paranoid and grief-stricken, and reading darkness into ordinary kindness. But Richard used to say that the gut knows things the heart refuses to accept, and by the time I pulled into that parking lot, my gut was absolutely certain. The woman at the front desk recognized me immediately and smiled warmly, and I almost came apart right there, because it had been so long since someone looked at me like I was simply myself, rather than a situation that needed managing. I told her I needed a complete review of every authorization on every account. Her expression shifted slightly, but she stayed professional, and 10 minutes later I was sitting in a private office with a bank manager named Carol, who walked me through everything with quiet patience. Vanessa had transaction alerts on my checking account. She had partial online access to my savings. There were documents connected to something labeled Future Financial Planning Assistance that I apparently signed during the fog of those first weeks after Richard's funeral, when I was barely sleeping and could hardly remember what day it was. I sat there looking at those papers and felt something move through me that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite sadness. It was recognition. Carol asked me what I wanted, and that simple question, what did I want, hit me harder than anything else that morning, because I realized how long it had been since anyone asked me that. I told her I wanted every authorization removed immediately. New account credentials, new PIN, new online passwords, everything. She handled it without hesitation, and when she slid the completed paperwork across the desk toward me, I signed it with a hand that didn't shake once. I drove afterward to a diner Richard and I loved near Hendersonville, and I ordered blueberry pancakes and real coffee, and I let my phone ring 6 times without answering it. Vanessa, Caleb, Vanessa again. The pancakes were perfect. When I got home, Caleb was standing in the kitchen with his arms crossed, and before he even said hello, he asked why Vanessa had been removed from my accounts. Not, how was your morning? Not, is everything okay? Just, the money. And in that moment, every last doubt I had been carrying dissolved completely. If this story is resonating with you, drop "still standing" in the comments, and drop "I woke up" in the comments if you have ever had that exact moment, where one small thing suddenly made everything else make sense. I read every name that shows up here. Caleb stood in my kitchen with his arms crossed and his jaw tight, and looked at me like I was the one who had done something wrong. Vanessa stood beside him, twisting her wedding ring the way she always does when she already knows a conversation is about to go badly. I set my purse on the counter slowly and waited, because I have learned in 69 years that whoever speaks first in a tense room usually loses. Caleb broke first. "Evelyn, we have sacrificed a lot to be here for you this past year, and this is how you respond?" I noticed he said sacrificed instead of chosen. I noticed he said for you instead of with you. Words reveal things people don't intend to show. I looked at him calmly and said, "Then you'll be relieved to know you won't have to sacrifice much longer." Vanessa's eyes filled immediately. "Mom, please don't do this. We were only trying to protect you." And there was that word again, protect. I had been hearing it for months, wrapped around every decision they made without me, every conversation they had about me, every quiet arrangement that chipped another piece of my independence away. I asked Vanessa directly when she had started discussing my house with a realtor. The color left her face so fast it was almost shocking. Caleb shot her a look that told me everything about who had been driving this and how long it had been going. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I simply opened my purse and placed a folder on the kitchen counter between us.
3 months before cancer took him, Richard had driven himself to our attorney's office on a Tuesday afternoon and quietly updated our family trust without mentioning it to anyone, including me. He left me a sealed letter inside the documents explaining why. He wrote that he had noticed things changing in how Vanessa talked about our finances and our future, and that he wanted to make sure I would never need anyone's permission to live my own life. The house was mine completely for as long as I lived. The savings were protected under my sole authority, and a significant portion of the estate was designated to pass directly to Ethan, our grandson, bypassing Vanessa entirely. Richard had seen it coming before I did. He just loved me quietly enough to handle it without frightening me while he was still here. Caleb read the first page and said nothing. Vanessa sat down hard in the kitchen chair like her legs had simply stopped working. I picked up my purse, walked upstairs to my bedroom, and opened the window that faced the garden Richard had planted the summer before he got sick. The roses were just starting to come back. That night, I booked a new flight to Savannah, same airline, window seat. Nobody canceled it. If you stayed with me through all 3 parts, I want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me one word that describes how this ending made you feel. And I want to hear from you right now, one word in the comments, just one, that describes how this ending made you feel. And if this story reminded you of someone, share it with them today, because some people need to hear that it is never too late to take their life back.